Hey girl, welcome to Rooted Radiance, the women's health podcast dedicated to helping you improve your health, grow, and radiate with confidence. I'm your host, registered dietitian Nicole Ibarra. Have you ever stepped on the scale only to feel frustrated and drained that the number didn't move despite you putting in so much effort? Or caught yourself thinking, what's the point? If any of this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Today, we're diving into the scale, what impacts it, why our weight loss can feel like it's stalling, how to shift your mindset so that the number on the scale doesn't negatively impact your mood or the day, how to get the needle moving again, and when to take a break from weighing in. Now, the scale, it's either your friend or your foe. You may be experiencing a weight loss plateau, or you may need to adjust some things. And no, it's not because your metabolism is broken. So first off, we really need to talk about what the scale is and what it represents. The scale is one number and it does not tell the whole story. It simply just tells your weight. And that weight on the scale is heavily influenced by so many factors. So I'm going to kind of run through a number of different factors that impact the number on the scale just to reassure you and get you familiar with the things that can influence your weight on the scale. So number one is digestion. And digestion will impact that number if you're having regular bowel movements and if you're not having regular bowel movements. If you're more constipated or if you have like a partial bowel movement, where you still have stool left, that could be impacting and convoluting that number on the scale. So digestion definitely plays a role in what that number on the scale says. Number two is the time of day. So if you're not consistent with the time of day that you weigh in, it's going to completely throw off the number on the scale. If you weighed yourself at different times in the same given day, you're going to notice that your weight changes. And that's completely normal because you're drinking fluids, you're consuming different amounts of food throughout the day, maybe you're changing different clothes. So all of that is going to complicate the number on the scale. Number three is carbs. Now, if you had a change in your carbohydrate intake, especially the days prior to your weigh-in, so a couple of days prior, leading up to your weigh-in, you will notice that the number on the scale changes. And it's not because carbs make you fat. Carbs do not just automatically make you gain fat. It's simply because of the water retention that comes from an increase in carbohydrate intake. Because the temporary storage of carbs in your body will need water to go with it, and that's called glycogen in your body. And once again, it's not because carbs make you gain fat. It's just simply because of the water retention. So if you have an increased amount of carbohydrates, say the dinner before you weigh in or the number of days leading up to that weigh in, it's going to influence the scale because of water. Similarly to carbs, your fluid intake and sodium intake influence the scale as well. So if you consumed fluids prior to weighing in that day, that's going to impact the number on the scale. Or if you had like an excessive amount of sodium in your diet, maybe you ate out the night before, that's going to cause some water retention because of the sodium intake that you had. So it looks like you gained weight, but it's not fat that you gained. It's just some fluid retention. Now, the fifth reason why scale might be influenced is because of your menstrual cycle. So it's normal for women to gain about 3 to 5 pounds when they're close to their cycle just due to the hormonal changes that are occurring in the body. And that might also cause fluid retention. So typically what I've seen and what's common is that most of that weight gain, regardless of what you had, maybe it's the 3 pounds, maybe it's 5 pounds, that usually subsides by day 3 of your period. So you should notice that maybe increasing right before your period, but it should fall off by around day 3 of your cycle. Now, the sixth reason why the scale would be impacted is because you may be wearing different clothes when you weigh in. If you're not wearing the same outfit on a day-to-day basis when you're weighing in, then that's going to impact the number on the scale, obviously, because different clothes weigh different amounts. So typically what I recommend is, in order to control as many variables as possible, just weigh in naked. Just step on the scale naked and do that consistently. don't try on different outfits when you weigh in. Just try to control as many variables as you can when you weigh in, if you choose to weigh in. Now, number 7, alcohol consumption can impact the scale as well. So, initially, you'll probably have a little bit of dehydration and then some water retention after alcohol intake. So, if you had a couple drinks the night before and then you weighed in, there may be some fluid retention that's occurring there as well because of the alcohol consumption. Number 8, and I hear this all the time. So sometimes I hear from clients that they maybe weigh in at home and then they go weigh in at their doctor's, or they weigh in at the gym, and it's different. And so it's really important to stick to one scale to weigh in consistently on, because each scale is calibrated a little bit differently. And then, if you're weighing in on different scales, like let's say you weighed in at home and then the same day or a week later, you had an appointment with your doctor and you weighed in at the doctor's office. The other factors that I already mentioned, like the time of day, the food or fluid intake you had, the clothing that you're wearing, is all influencing that number on the scale. So just skip that. Don't even pay attention to that number. Just stick to one scale and have that be your focus and like your controlled variable for weighing in. Now, the 9th reason that can influence the weight on the scale is inflammation. So inflammation, there's like short-term inflammation that can occur and more chronic inflammation. They both will impact the scale. Sometimes I'll have clients that, one day will forget to weigh in the morning and then they'll weigh in after their workout later on in the day, or later on in the morning. And that actually will look like you gained weight, but it's because of that short-term inflammation after a workout. When you're exerting a lot of energy, maybe you went on a run, or maybe you were strength training in the gym, there is some acute inflammation that occurs, and that's going to cause a temporary influence on the scale. So just keep that in mind when you're weighing in. And the 10th reason is body composition changes. So sometimes you might step on the scale and you weigh the same and you're getting frustrated because you feel like you've been putting in all this work, you've been tracking your food intake, you've been very active, and it may not look like you're losing weight, but it could just be the fact that you have been changing your body composition. So maybe you lost fat, but you actually gained some lean muscle mass. So it looks like nothing changed. But the scale is only a number and it does not tell you what your body composition is. So maybe you lost fat and gained some lean muscle mass. So that would be a positive thing that's happened, but it is something that does influence the scale and something for you to consider if you're weighing in and you feel like you're stuck. It could be because you're actually positively changing your body composition. Now, when I work with clients, I always encourage additional methods of measuring progress besides the scale. So, like I said, the scale is just a number. It doesn't give you a lot of data. So, thinking of that in mind, you can use other metrics to measure success. So, sometimes I recommend measuring like your waist, your hips, glutes, thigh, or arms. At a minimum, I would recommend measuring your waist and your hip on a monthly basis, because that will help to show you if you're losing inches. Again, it can also play a role, and if the scale's not moving but you've lost inches, that tells us that you've probably lost some fat and you're gaining maybe some lean muscle mass, and that's influencing the scale a bit. In addition to just inches lost by measuring, like, say, your waist, you can also take progress photos, and some people feel comfortable doing that. Some people don't. Depends on what you prefer doing. But progress photos can definitely help you see a physical difference. It's not something that you would take frequently. I would recommend taking them about once a month because it's going to take some time to see that physical difference. So having a lot of different metrics to measure success can help to make you feel like you are on the right path. So outside of just metrics, there's other non-metric really related factors that can signal that you're making progress. So I'm going to go over a few of those so that you can keep these in mind. The first being energy levels. So think about your energy levels as you've been trying to lose weight and change lifestyle and diet. Do you feel more energized than before? If you've made changes with your diet and your lifestyle, you're going to naturally notice an increase in energy levels, and that shows that you're making progress on your health. Strength is another thing to consider. So, do you feel stronger than before? Did you hit a PR in the gym with an increase in weight? Or have you noticed that everyday activities feel easier to do, like carrying groceries into your house? Or maybe it's easier to get up from the floor. Those are some simple things that we typically take for granted that you might feel like it's easier to do. And it also displays that you're growing your strength and that's showing progress in your health. Another thing to consider is mood changes. So, are you experiencing less anxiety or depression? Do you have a lighter feeling mood on a day-to-day basis? Another thing to consider would be your clothes. So, do your clothes fit differently? So maybe the scale hasn't budged, but do you feel differently? Maybe you feel looser in your clothes than before, or maybe you fit in your clothes better because you built more muscle and lost some fat, right? So think about, like, say you were trying to build some lean muscle mass and lose a little bit of weight. Maybe your glutes look better in your jeans than before. You can even kind of test this out by seeing a friend or a family member you haven't seen in a while and see if they say anything. If they haven't seen you for quite some time and they say a comment or ask you if you've lost weight, they're noticing that change in your body composition. So take note of that. Any sort of comment or compliment from somebody that you haven't seen for a while, that's another indicator. Something else to pay attention to would be your pain or aches. So are you noticing less pain or achy joints than before? That's another sign of progress, that you're improving your body, probably improving inflammation that you possibly had in your body previously. And then think of your performance. So again, maybe the scale hasn't gone down, but maybe your athletic performance is improving. Maybe you're running longer or faster than before. Maybe you can do higher box jumps. Maybe you can hike uphill longer. So think about your performance and if that has improved at all. Another thing to consider is your resting heart rate and your HRV. So if you use any sort of fitness tracker, most of them test your heart rate. They likely will tell you what your resting heart rate is. So when you improve your fitness, you'll notice that your resting heart rate tends to decrease. So have you noticed a decrease in your typical resting heart rate? And then another thing to look at is your heart rate variability, your HRV. And that is another sign of improved fitness. So if your heart rate variability is improved and it's higher than it typically is, that's another indication that you're improving your health and your fitness. Now, beyond all these other things that I had mentioned, I have a much longer list of some non-scale wins. If you're interested in that, shoot me a DM or email and I'll send that right over to you. So as we've talked about, there's many factors that influence the scale and several ways to measure progress outside of the scale itself. But what if it's not moving after a few weeks? If it's not moving after a few weeks, then I would really suggest a test out and see if you're in a true calorie deficit. Because in order to lose weight, one of the core principles is that you have to be in a calorie deficit. And sometimes you might be eating more calories than you think. So you may need to track calories to ensure that you're in a deficit. What I've seen with some clients in the past is they don't track everything. Did you track the creamer in your coffee? What about the condiments that you had? Or what about that bite off of your child's plate? It might seem small, but they do add up over the course of a day. So what if you're tracking everything diligently and you're still not losing weight? It might be because of your activity. Have you had a week where you're just not as active as you usually are, and so you're burning less calories? Instead of you normally being on a calorie deficit, that might actually put you in a maintenance level. So you might need to bump up your activity simply by just adding some more steps in, or maybe going to an extra gym class that you were going to before. Now, if calories is not the issue, and if activity is not the issue, it's possibly that you might be in a weight loss plateau. And this can happen, especially if you've been in a calorie deficit trying to lose weight for an extended period of time. It's called metabolic adaptation. And if that happens, I tend to have a client just try to go on a diet break for about a week or two, and then we can start dipping back down in calories. So a diet break is essentially going on to your maintenance calories and then dipping back down into a calorie deficit to facilitate additional weight loss. Sometimes that can be really, really helpful for people. Now, if you notice yourself being obsessed with the number on the scale, if it's consuming your thoughts, if it negatively impacts your mood for the day, or if you notice yourself removing food groups or skipping meals because of the scale, it's time to step away from the scale and just focus on the non-scale wins I mentioned. In order to make peace with the scale, I believe you need to come to an understanding that there are so many factors that play a role in that number moving on the scale. And it's not just because whenever the number increases means that you gained fat. It can be for all the other reasons that we talked about. So again, it's important to normalize that the number moves, whether it's related to fat gain or loss or something else. So I would really encourage you to start to think about your thoughts a little bit more. So what do you think about the scale? Is it something that you're obsessing over? If so, let's remove it. If it's something that you can understand that there's so many factors that play a role, and you have a little bit more peace with it, it's one metric that we can use, but I would highly encourage that you use the other metrics that I talked about, some of the non-scale wins and some of the other metrics or progress photos to show yourself additional ways that you're making progress in your health goals. And please let me leave you with this. It's not about a number. It's about how you feel and your health. And your health is not defined by one number. So please, please remember that. The scale doesn't tell you your worth. It's not about that. What really matters is your health. How do you feel? Have you improved your fitness? Have you improved your blood work? There's so many things that influence your health. And again, the scale is not a definition of your health. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you subscribe to the podcast, whichever platform that you're listening on, so you don't miss out on future episodes. If you found any value from the podcast, please leave a 5-star review so more women like you can know and find this podcast. Connect with me on social media at Dietitian Nicole Ibarra. I'll leave all the information below for you. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful day.